This is Angela Harden, General Manager of WHCR 90.3 FM, and we are very excited about a brand new show on WHCR. It's called 125th Street and Beyond. The host is Barbara Askins, President and CEO of the 125th Street Business Improvement District in Harlem, better known as the 125 BID. Her resume is so extensive, I could take up the whole show just talking about the work she has done, but we'll talk a little bit about what she's done here in Harlem. She successfully created the first and only business improvement district in the Harlem community. She is guiding the development of result-oriented strategies involving retail plans, rezoning for future growth, cultural sustainability, and evaluating the interplay between science, technology, and businesses. Her public involvement strategies have led to successes such as the annual Harlem Holiday Lights, the first cultural bonus incentive in New York City to be used to shape the future of 125th Street as a cultural destination. Working closely with NYPD and 12 other city agencies, she is driving an interagency and community involvement approach that is addressing crime, homelessness, mental illness, sanitation, and streetscape improvements. Barbara, welcome to WHCR. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Angela. Good afternoon, listeners. 125th Street and Beyond is a show about the work we are doing at the 125th Street Business Improvement District, better known as BID, here in Harlem. It is also a show about the relationships we are building with city agencies and BIDs around the world. We will be giving updates on what's happening and addressing issues that impact the commercial district. Our guests today are C. Virginia Fields, President of National Black Leadership Commission on Health. Virginia is also a commercial tenant on 125th Street and a member of the Public Safety Committee for the 125th Street BID. We will be joined also by State Senator Cardell Clare, who is also a member of the BID as an office tenant in the Harlem State Office Building at 163 West 125th Street. And her office is located in the State Office Building. Virginia and Cardell, welcome to 125th Street and Beyond. Our theme song is Bet You Didn't Know About That. One of the goals of this show is to bring to our listeners information about the work we do at the BID and to introduce them to others who are involved in making 125th Street a great commercial district. Virginia and Cardell are both very important to the work we do, particularly as it relates to the health and the well-being of the district and in achieving a great quality of life for those who work, visit, invest, and now live on 125th Street. Yes, our residential population is increasing as more development projects are complete. So let's talk health, let's talk politics, let's talk public safety, the social well-being of 125th Street and Harlem, and yes, cannabis. But before we start the conversation, we will do a station ID. You are listening to WHCR 90.3 FM. The show is the 125th Street and Beyond. I'm your host, Barbara Askins, and my guest today is C. Virginia Fields of the National Black Leadership Commission on Health. Virginia, I first met you when they were trying to put a methadone clinic on 125th Street next to the Studio Museum, which was then Beth Israel. Through that time, you served on the BID steering committee, which helped to create the BID when you were the board president. And now you also helped sign the BID into law. So your story is very interesting to me, and I'm sure to everyone. So many people know Virginia from so many different things that she has done in her life. But can you tell our listeners your story? Exactly where are you from? What did you do before you came to Harlem? What made you choose Harlem as a place to live? Tell us about your social work experience in Harlem. Why did you go into politics? What is the nature of the work that you are doing now with the National Black Leadership Commission on Health? Why you are so dedicated to helping us make 125th Street a success? I know that's a lot of questions, but it's really hard to, put you in a small package, Virginia, as you are such a wealth of information and accomplishments. Virginia.
First of all, thank you And my goodness, I was listening to you. I said, oh, wow, she wants me to respond to all that, but I will, and I will do it in a time frame that gives us all the time we need for this wonderful show. First of all, let me congratulate you. Let me congratulate you on hosting this show. I think this is an important way to get more information out there to the general public about the good work that you have done and continue to do here on 125th Street. So I think this is great. And of course, you're doing it on one of my favorite stations, WHCR. I love WHCR and have been associated with them for a number of years, but coming in this way for this show is very exciting. So I do want to congratulate you. Let me say, in terms of where I'm from, I started laughing on that. Where am I from? What do you mean, where am I from? But anyway, I was born and grew up in the segregated South of Birmingham, Alabama. And what's of interest now is that as I look at a lot of what we're going through throughout this country as it relates to voter suppression and issues of poverty and reproductive rights, that's sort of what I cut my teeth on. Having been born and grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, in the segregated South, I grew up under a system, as I know you did, Barbara, to a certain extent, because you grew up in Louisiana, where everything was segregated based on race, the color of your skin, where you lived, where you went to school, where your parents could work or not work. But it was also a time that really framed for me what I have ultimately started doing in my life. I became very active in social issues because my mother was a community organizer that we now call, and she was very much involved with the whole civil rights movement in Birmingham. And as a teenager in '63, I was one of the foot soldiers who marched with Dr. King and was arrested and spent 6 days fighting for social justice. And after I left Birmingham and attended Knoxville College in Tennessee, and after that, received my master's in social work from Indiana University, got married and moved to New York. That is what brought me to New York in the early '70s. And in doing School of Social Work, I always desired working in Harlem because you learn so much about Harlem in the School of Social Work. So I worked at the first work release program for prisoners, which made it possible for Black men primarily to come out before their expiration date in order to get readjusted to the community. There is the Director of Social Services. And from there, I worked with the Children's Aid Society as the supervisor in home care and adoption. And from there, I had what I call the position of my lifetime, and that was with the National Board of the YWCA, where I worked as a national field consultant covering the Eastern region. And what the reason I say it was the position of a lifetime is because their motto is elimination of racism by any means necessary. And that just fed into my story that I had experienced up to that point. And after that, while on my way to thinking about I wanted a doctorate degree, I was in school in, I guess it was the latter part of 1989. And by then, my husband and I were living in New York, in Harlem, and we saw so much devastation. And I had been appointed to the local community board, and it really did create a desire to bring about a change, because I know by working together, you can make a difference. So through my Democratic Club, the Frederick Samuel Democratic Club, I was able to get the support. We ran against an incumbent, we won, and that set the stage for my political career. I see government as an entity for which change can be made. Not everything can be done by government, but there's a lot that government can do for its people, and that is how I use government. And of course, just to say, I also served as the chair of the Community Board 10, which Barbara, you also served as, so we have that in common. So all of that led to where I am today, and through it all, as the chair of the Community Board, as a council member, as a Manhattan Borough President, I have been attached to 125th Street. So being a part of it now as a member of the board just only encourages me to stay involved, because I have a sense of the history. All of that has been done and still needs to be done. That's who I am, that's where I am, and I'm delighted to be here today.
This is exciting for me, Virginia, because I go back to that day when, again, when I said I first saw you walk into Andrew Stein's office when they were trying to put that methadone clinic next to the Studio Museum. And way back then in the late 1980s, location was an issue. Location. We've been talking about, protecting that they wanted to put that next to the Studio Museum, which was at that time, only Black full accredited museum in the country. And we had to fight. And so our senator hasn't joined us yet. She's in Albany. So Virginia, you and I are going to continue this conversation until she joins us. But it was at that particular point where I could see commerce and social work and, the quality of life in our community coming together. So many people were fighting for that. And so isn't it ironic that we're in the same space here all these years later, where we have too many social service programs that are well-intended in the wrong location and packed together. As a politician, because you've been on both sides, what are your thoughts on how do we get government and community to work closer together around locating services that we actually need?
Well, you're absolutely correct in terms of our efforts with that first methadone center. What I say, Barbara, all the time is that as elected officials, first of all, we need to pay attention. We need to know what is being planned for our community. Plus, we need to lead in terms of that planning. I can recall, even as a member of the as chair of the Community Board, we led in terms of moving to get those brownstones that were just sitting dilapidated and no income coming into the community. We led in order to get the city to work with the community in establishing a plan to sell those buildings. We led on issues related to blocks not being used for all social service programs when they wanted to, house persons living with AIDS in brownstones. And while we were certainly supportive of the need for that, we did not want every block and every brownstone that was vacant to be used for persons with living with AIDS specifically at that time, not out of fear, but in terms of trying to build a residential community. So the point here is that elected officials need to lead, and they need to be aware of what is being proposed, and they have to fight in order to make sure that we are not overly saturated. And I would say over the last 10, 12 years or so, that is the case here. So what am I saying? I'm saying that people are not paying attention. They are not leading. They are not pushing back. And it is harder to have a facility or a program removed after the fact. So how we became oversaturated is because there were no conversations, and you're absolutely correct. There must be collaboration and cooperation at every level: federal, state, local, business, the community-based organizations, programs, understanding what the needs. And when you do that, you can see a difference. I would add that certainly as Manhattan Borough President, I saw that throughout many areas of Manhattan. how people work together in their community, and they were able to get the services that were needed and got the resources and the dollars, and they had the leadership of those elected and the business community, and we see a difference. So I just think it calls for a holistic approach of everybody working together.
And I agree with you. And you also know that's not an easy thing to make happen, to get everybody to collectively work together. So let's go back to community board. I served as chair of the community board, and it was under your leadership. You appointed me to the community board. And I know one of the reasons for me, I came onto the community board as a community member. And what I learned from you was that something, and you may not remember when you said this to me, Barbara, when you a certain age, it's what they didn't do, and then you come to an age where it's what you didn't do. So if you don't get involved, in shaping your community, then you have what you have because you're not trying to make it better. And so that was my reason for wanting to be on the community board, is to try to make a difference, to put my little part in. And I started from, as I say, community member. I served as chair of economic development. I was treasurer. I worked my way all the way up. And one day I said, well, I have to be chair. So what made you decide to be chair of the community board?
Well, and interesting enough, I had only been on the community board for about a year before I became chair. It was time for the membership to turn over, to change over, and the opportunity presented itself. And I did not like what I was seeing. It was like just a continuation of voices moving in the same direction, no new ideas, and the problems that we were facing in the community. And I would add that I was appointed to the community board by the late Councilman Fred Samuel, because my husband at the time and I went to him because we could not get a small loan from the bank. And both of us were working, and we knew that our combined income made it possible for us to make that loan. So the Councilman, Fred Samuel, agreed with us that it was clearly redlining, and he chose to appoint me to the board in order to, and that's how I got on the board. Once I got on the board, I did not see enough direction moving to protect our borders, to provide the opportunity and the services that were needed, even down to sanitation, having sanitation being picked up on a timely manner. So I saw all of this, and the election time came around after my first year on the board, and I was bold enough and bad enough to say, I want to run, and I got the support, and I won.
Well, that's fantastic. And one of the people that you appointed on the board was Mr. Seymour. I remember Mr. Seymour, and he would tell me all the time, Barbara Askins, power is not given, it's taken. So you could be the best person, you could be the smartest, but if you don't realize you have to get in there and take the power, you will never get in. And so again, that was some of your work. I see we are joined by our great Senator Cardell Clare. So Cardell, I'm used to calling you Cardell, and I try to give you your prompts as senator, but I'd like to say that you were born and raised in Harlem. We started to work together when you were working with Councilmember Bill Perkins, but before I met you, I heard of you because of the work, your advocacy work to end lead poisoning. So can you tell the audience a little bit about your early childhood stories around 125th Street? We'd like you to elaborate on what drove you to do the advocacy work and then ultimately move into politics. You and Virginia have similar paths, and I heard you recently speak about the budget. You have a lot going on up there in Albany. We'd love to hear about some of the things, budgets that you just passed that could help 125th Street. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about, or at least bring to your attention, that I recognize the the fantastic work you're doing for seniors. So can you share a little bit about who you are, your compassion for Harlem, and your dedication to 125th Street?
Yeah, well, that's a lot. But I'll start with 125th Street was the place. That's where you came. You come to the place, and we would come and stand outside of the record shop and listen to the music. You know, that was when records came out. So as young people, and of course you come to see the fashion and the marquees of the Apollo Theater, always wanting to know who was playing at the Apollo, and if you could catch a glimpse of them. It was always a fun time, fun place to get to. So, you know, we always looked at it. That was our 125th Street was our Times Square. That was the place to come to, you know, after church or on Easter. It was just a place that you wanted to come and look at all the shops, look at the new fashions, all the shoes, and just, you know, from even back with AJ Lester, some of the stores that used to on 25th Street. You know, even if you couldn't buy it, you could see it and wish that you could get that. So that has always been that place. And 125th Street has always been a place of information, right? So people from the community, they would be out there with the microphones, they would be out there, you know, in past years with the tracks, and whether it was clergy or even the Nation of Islam, other groups that would be out there from time to time, and even just people speaking to the community and giving us information. It just seemed like that was the world. That was the place to come to. So I really revere it. And as I've gotten older and gotten into public service, I realized the important lifeblood that it is to our community. The modes of transportation that come into 125th Street, the numbers of people who come through our community, and how we are the connectors to so many other places, right? With the Metro North, the East Side, the number 2 and 3, the 8th Avenue line. And so you see how, you know, how very wonderfully placed 125th Street is in the scope of things, that can bring customers to our stores, that can bring our people to other places to work, to jobs, and so forth and so on. Now, as far as my previous work, it's very connected to the former borough president, Virginia Fields, because I got into advocacy. First of all, I never, ever thought I would ever be elected, never wanted to. I did. In fact, I wouldn't tell you what I thought of being elected at one time, and even said I would never. But there you go, right? So I've always tried to be, you know, I've been active. And I always thought I was going to be someone who made a whole bunch of money on Wall Street, and I'd be able to take care and get my mother a house and all those great things that I thought she should have. But I realized that the type of activities and the type of trajectory that my parents put me on, I didn't know any better, but they taught me to care about my community. They taught me to stand up for other people. They taught me to, and so they tricked me, I guess. And I found out I always wound up in a situation because I'm advocating for something or another. And one day that thing became one of my children who was affected by lead poisoning. And I was stunned because here I am, this active person. I think I know a lot of things. I think I know about a lot of things. And it happened to me. And I didn't even know this was still a problem in the United States of America. And as I began to do the research and tried to get resources and looking for help and looking for assistance, I realized that this was a huge problem, and it primarily affected Black children and other non-white children of color. And when I talked about it, I talked about it in the context of environmental racism, and not because lead can affect anyone, but I felt like it had remained the problem that it had become, and it affected so many people of color, and nothing was done about it because of our race, and because of our race, we didn't have the voice and the power that others had, particularly real estate. And I ventured on a journey and started talking around the city and working with organizations and groups, and early childhood educators, healthcare providers, clergy, unions, anybody who would listen, anybody who would help us as poor Black parents, Latino parents, to help us get protections for other children, because what had happened had already happened to my child. So it was too late to do that, but we could certainly shape policy and change what happened to others. And on that journey is where, that was the first time meeting her, but definitely on that journey was where I became very involved with our former councilwoman and former borough president, Virginia Fields, because she actually provided, helped with the funding to provide a safe place for families to go to. Because if this happened in your home, and it did happen in our homes, there was no place to go to get out of the danger. The threat was in your home, and you needed a place to get away through. So I'm thankful that Virginia Fields at the time had the vision and the wherewithal and the desire and actually took action to create the first lead safe house in Manhattan. Me and my family had to stay in the Bronx because there wasn't any, but she created one in Manhattan, and it has been a help and a blessing to many families who need to get out of that environment while it's being remediated. So I guess that and a few other things, there was a gentleman in our community, his name was Elambe Brathwaite. I'll lift his name up always. Yes. And I was fascinated. That's Africa. He was talking about things that were happening outside of the country that we'd never heard about, and actually talked about apartheid and got me involved in that kind of movement. We didn't know these things as younger people that were going on in the rest of the world. And it just gave me, I got the best education from the people around me, like Elambe, like Virginia, like others who were in our community. Ennis Francis, you mentioned Mr. Seymour. Yes, him too. A lot of input. My tenant leaders that were in the community at the time, education leaders, Preston Wilcox, Matt Gaston. These are people who I had the privilege, and I feel lucky that I was able to be around because they taught me how to fight. Ruby Kitchen, just so many people. Some of them are gone now, but I didn't know that's what was happening to me at the time, but that's what was happening at the time, that I was being molded and taught how to fight and how to care for my community. And of course, you mentioned I had the amazing opportunity to serve with our former council member, Bill Perkins, for 19 years, which took me through the city council as well as the Senate as his staff person and chief of staff. And I learned a lot. I learned a great deal. He was a phenomenal leader in our community. And I liked the personality because it was sometimes doing things and saying things that were not so popular, but they were the right things to say and they were the right things to do, standing up for our community. So I really appreciate having that kind of mentorship and that kind of leadership to learn from. And, here I am today, just not thinking that I would ever be in this space, but I'm thankful to my parents and all those other people in the community who guided me and helped me find my space. And I'm so proud to represent this community that I love, that has given me everything I have. I owe it all to them. And I just, there's not a day that I don't talk about this community and fight for it in some way or another. And I literally just ran up here from session where we were voting on some policies, and yeah.
And I really truly appreciate this, because as you know, we haven't been on the same page with everything, but that's what Harlem is about. It's about fighting for what you believe in, and it's about sharing and working together. And it's one of the reasons that I will also want to have this radio show so that others could see. This is not the first time that we've had battles and challenges that we're facing in the community, but the way that we were able to get out of it was working together. Yeah. And the times you talk about, that was times when people you didn't have to know who were the pillars of the community. They would come and get you. Oh, wait a minute, I saw you the other day walking down the street. What are you working on? Well, let me tell you what it's about. And I think we need to get back to that to help to shape, because maybe some of these things are happening because we're not giving people, more direction. I just want to say here, we got a little station break to say that you are listening to WHCR 90.3 FM. The show is 125th Street and Beyond. I'm your host, Barbara Askins, and my guest today, C. Virginia Fields, president of the National Black Leadership Commission on Health, and New York State Senator Cardale Clare. So now, Virginia and Cardale, I'd like for you to just talk to each other a little bit. You have also worked closely on a number of issues. So can you elaborate, which you already did a little bit, Cardale, but about your work and relationships with each other, and particularly now, both of you are in different positions. Tell us how you continuing to work together with each other.
Well, let me just say to Cardale, our state senator, thank you. And as she was talking about the lead safe house, it really just brought an emotional moment here but she really did lead that fight, bringing it to the city council. And it was like, why isn't somebody paying attention? So when I became board president, she said, being in a position, having the resources, we did open the first lead safe house up around Columbia Presbyterian. And that was just a very special moment, but it was because of her activism. We've also worked together on education in our schools because she has been a staunch advocate fighting for not only Watley in terms of resources there, but other schools. So we had an opportunity to work there, bringing resources into the schools. And I think that is so key in terms of what Cardale also said. People in the community who took interest in you. Unfortunately or fortunately, I didn't grow up in Harlem. And there was this thing always, you weren't born in Harlem Hospital, you had no right to nothing, But my commitment to this community and willing to use my knowledge, my understanding of issues gave me what I needed to show everybody that I didn't have to be born in the community to care about the community. I was not new to struggle because I didn't grow in the community, and I was willing to put everything I had as the president of my homeowners association, starting right there at 131st Street across from St. Nicholas Housing, to becoming the president of the Amsterdam Democratic Club. That was Carl McCall's club. And I don't know if you remember Cardale or not, but that was the first election that Diane Lacy
yes.
And Ed Sullivan ended up winning
Yep.
it on the side of Diane and Carl. And then after Perkins, we really did say, there's this young man over there. He is full of energy. Let's support him for something. And then he was encouraged to run for district leader. So it was all of that, people recognizing what some of the potential was, and I was being recognized as potential. Perkins was seen for all of what he did. And by the way, when I worked for the first work release program for prisoners here in Harlem, I was actually his supervisor because we worked together. And that's how we became associated. So there are these connections, but what I see missing today, and then I'll flip it to Cardale, is that I don't see that same kind of energy in sort of creating a bench for others, creating a pipeline so that we know who is getting the training, who's getting the exposure, who has the potential. And while things happen all of the time, we never know when shifts are going to be made. We know who to tap into and support. And the willingness to learn. I might add that, over the years, I've seen, even working with me sometimes, not willing to take the time to invest as sometimes it is. So all of that, I think, is part of certain my experience in working with Cardell. We, as you said, we haven't always been on the same team supporting candidates, but there has never been a difference in terms of recognizing certainly what our senator has to offer.
Thank you. Yeah, that you've said so much that I agree with. Virginia, putting in the work is important. And more than being born or raised or anything, showing your commitment. You know, a lot of people just show up, and it's, you know, you got to show your commitment to people, to community, to, and to, for me, this is about service, right? So I'm a servant. And in order to be a servant, you have to understand who you're serving, and you have to know how to serve them, and have to learn. And I don't always want to do it that way, maybe, or, you know, I don't always think of this thing or that. But if you listen to people, you constantly listen, whether you agree or not, you listen and you make sure that you're trying. One thing we're always on the same page about, it's about this community. Everybody's working to do the thing that they think is best. Now, we may not agree with the approach or the way or the who, but we are definitely, I believe, on the same page, wanting to advance our people, advance our community, and get this work done. And, you know, I've watched Virginia as she worked on very important and critical things during this COVID pandemic, when we lacked leadership, we lacked resources. We were neglected. We were neglected. I was not elected as of yet, but I saw her and others come together in this community and say, no, we got to get help for our people. We're not going to be overlooked. We need resources. We have to get services. And it's so important, working on the AIDS epidemic, which some people think is gone and it's over, and it's not. You know, with Black people being the most impacted still, working on COVID and other, now expanding now to the full health. And you know, it's so timely because during the pandemic, we saw how there was such disparities on every level. For many people that we lost during COVID, we lost because of underlying conditions that had already existed, with hypertension, diabetes, you know, you name it, we've got it. So these are all, there are so many issues to fight for in our community. We have to serve, jump in. I always tell people, they say, well, how do you jump in? There's something here to do, jump in. Criminal justice reform, jump in. Our child welfare policies and services, jump in. Gang violence, gun violence, jump into it. Mental health, jump in. Just get involved, because we're ripe with things that need to be worked on and things that need to be done. I'm informed by local groups. They tell me where the money needs to go. They tell me what the policies need to be. They tell me what the services need to be, what's not working, what is working. And I really try to extend myself as far and wide as I can. From going, I visit our schools, to this weekend I spent with the mothers, with women at Bedford Correctional Facility, just understanding everything that's going on in our community and with our people, so that we can figure out a way to stop entering those institutions, to stop the suspensions of our children, to stop our children being hungry, all the things that we can to battle the social ills that are out here. These are the things that you have to be willing to do, and you have to be willing to sit and work and talk with others and learn and find out what you could be doing to help. So I use every single tool in my toolbox, and one of them is working together. And I didn't mention you, Barbara, because I've watched you lead and I've learned from you, you know, and I've said, wow, you know, okay, you fight for our businesses. Very important, very important. If we don't have businesses in our community, we're dead. Those businesses are how many people got their first jobs or second jobs, or other business that comes to them from those businesses. So as we fight towards Black empowerment and community empowerment, we have to protect and preserve our businesses on our main strip and in existing areas. And I've seen the work you've done over the years. And again, we may not have always agreed, but you know, you have brought and helped people maintain in our community so that we do have more businesses and more services that we can take advantage of right here in our own community and attract others to come and be here, which is part of. Mhm.
Before you mention something, Barbara, let me just say something that she said that I love. When she said, jump in, just jump in and do it, because that is exactly what we need more of, people to jump in. And taken from Mayor Adams, he always says, now let's work upstream and come downstream. So let's put in the time, let's put in the resources, and let it. And there are a lot of people willing to jump in, and we have to recognize that they too have a lot to offer and not just dismiss people because they may not have been there for as long as some others. Just wanted to say that.
Oh, it is so timely. You are listening to WHCR 90.3 FM. The show is 125th Street and Beyond. I'm your host, Barbara Askins, and my guest today is C. Virginia Fields and State Senator Cardell Clare. We're going to take a quick music break, and then when we come back, we're going to get into some even deeper challenges than we're going to talk about some deeper challenges than what has already been discussed. Thank you for listening. We're going to take a quick music break.
If you ladies couldn't hear that song, it's I'm Every Woman by Chaka Khan. It's very apropos for the three of you. And Barbara, if you just give me one opportunity to once again thank C. Virginia Fields for providing funding to WHCR as Manhattan Borough President. It is because of her love for WHCR that I'm sitting in this beautiful state-of-the-art facility. And I'm able to put you ladies on a Zoom for this show. So Ms. Fields, thank you once again. And back to you, Barbara.
Welcome back to 125th Street and Beyond. I am your host, Barbara Askins, and I'm discussing with Manhattan Borough President C. Virginia Fields, past Manhattan Borough President C. Virginia Fields, current president of the National Black Leadership Commission on Health, and New York State Senator Cardell Clare. Earlier, we discussed the history of Harlem, our commitment to Harlem, why we work so hard to make Harlem better. And now we still today have challenges that we must deal with immediately and ongoing. Challenges that many of you have read about in the newspaper, drug use and drug sales, homelessness, oversaturation of drug treatment clinics, illegal street vending. There must be a time where we find a way to incorporate street vending into the mix on 125th Street, illegal smoke shops and shoplifting, and now a proposed cannabis dispensary across from the world famous Apollo Theater, so close near to our children that come there for so many reasons. I'll start off with you, Cardell, about your perceptions and concerns about 125th Street today. I know that you've been on the battlefield in Albany. You've been introducing some legislation. So the topics, there are so many of them. So pick which one you want to talk about, which is the most challenging for you and one that you feel we have to address immediately.
Well, I got to say that we have to deal with the gun violence in our community. It is paramount. We recently commemorated the mass shooting in Buffalo, the 1-year anniversary of that tragic shooting. And I was mentioning to my colleagues and others, this is very sad that someone came in and was able to do something like this and kill so many people and injure others and traumatize others for the rest of their lives. But we also suffer mass shootings, maybe not all at one supermarket with one assault rifle. And we did a lot of work around that to ban those, but we do mass shootings one at a time in our community. We are shooting each other, and it's so tragic. I know so many families. In fact, I still remain in touch with some of the mothers who've lost their children. It's just so hard and so tragic. So that is of paramount concern to me, as well as the housing crisis that we are undergoing right now. It's as bad as it's been. Recent reports in New York Times shows that 200,000 Blacks left New York City. Didn't leave New York City and move upstate, moved out of the state completely. There's a recent report that just came out that shows those who are rent burdened, even though they have not moved and people are not homeless, they are burdened with rent that they're paying that is more than half their income. In some cases, upwards above 2/3 of their income they're paying in rent. So at any minute, just one thing needs to happen and they can be out of their homes. And this is difficult when you have people living like that. They are sacrificing other things that they're not doing, like eating properly and getting other things that they need in their homes for their children. So that is a great concern to me. And then, of course, there is business opportunities and business in our communities. And what I look at again, 125th Street, what's going on there right now, we do have an oversaturation of certain kinds of programs that attract a common customer often who needs. We should do better for them and we should do better for ourselves. Because when you place people in an environment where there's so much of that happening, you're not giving them a fighting chance to win. And on top of that, it's harming the community around them. So I know, Barbara, you fought, and the homeowners and others and concerned neighbors have fought about the oversaturation of drug treatment centers. And mind you, I believe in drug treatment. Okay, members of my own family, I thank God for drug treatment centers because it saves some of their lives. But we have to manage them properly. We cannot put all of them in one community. We have to make sure that we are providing other supports for them and other services for them that are also needed. And those are the kinds of things that I fought for in this budget. And we also have to make sure that we're dealing with things at earlier ages and at other points before it gets to where it is now. As far as 125th Street, I'm going to start right with the first thing. The community should have been a part of this conversation. There should have been no plans to put a cannabis selling dispensary in the middle of our main thoroughfare without a conversation. And what does that do when you don't have a conversation? You don't know what's happening in the community. You don't know we're already battling this oversaturation and trying to deal with it. You are not doing your due diligence to find out that this may not be the best location. And then you just bring it on us in the middle of there not being adequate policies to deal with the already proliferation of illegal smoke shops already in the community. We didn't even deal with that properly. So one of the things that I was fighting for with right alongside this budget was that we would get legislation that helped to deal with this proliferation and existence of these illegal shops that are in our community. We've now provided the Office of Cannabis Management and Tax and Finance the authority to administratively inspect any business involved in the adult use cannabis trade, which includes the illegal pop-up shops that have that I talked about that have proliferated, as well as the vehicles that they're driving around in. The OGM will also, OCM will also have the authority to impose $4,000 to $8,000 fines per instance and seize any illicit cannabis products, cease and desist, as well as closure orders may also be sought and liens can be placed upon the premises. So we put in legislation more tools that OCM and others can use. The State Department of Taxation and Finance is essentially given parallel powers now, and they can impose even higher fines and legal consequences on those in the illegal cannabis market. And in addition,
Senator, I want to get Virginia in here
I'm so sorry.
before we run out of time here. And then we'll come back to you because you guys have some upcoming events and I want you to give that announcement as well.
Mhm.
So Virginia, two things. One, there was an article that came out in the Patch talking about vacancies. And there's something that's been a pet peeve for me. And I even taught a course at Columbia University about the impact of the news on our population. When something is written, we see it as truthful. And a lot of these stories don't dig deep enough to give the real truth. And so on that, the number of vacancies on 125th Street, I know I don't think it gives a clear picture of what's really going on, but I want to hear your impact, your take on that, and also for you to touch on the cannabis, because you have been a part of the BID subcommittee that have been dealing with this issue since December. It was not a fast decision we made to move into suing to prevent that lawsuit from coming. So if you could touch on those two issues and the little time we have left.
Having read the article on the patch, I agree. It did not give the full story. Gave the story is that everything on 125th Street is totally abandoned and focused more on the central area, because that's where the Apollo is and several other notable stores. So it gave the impression that almost nothing was being done. And to that, I am going to write a note to the editor, because there's so much good work that has been done, that's been led by you, Barbara. And while they can talk about the bad, I think it's also important to talk about the good. And that speaks to why there is so much opposition to placing a dispensary there on 125th Street in that core area, because of all of the work that is being done and everything that we still need to do, fighting the drug activities, the shoplifting, the shootings, the murdering, all of that is being addressed. And for this plan, it only exacerbates the problem. And so I agree with the senator in terms of what she said with respect to no communication and no in advance notice. But I want to be clear to all of our listeners that the opposition here is that is the wrong location. Even if they shut down every social service provider surrounding the area, that is not the right location for a cannabis dispensary. Let's stay on that point, because I think there is getting confused if it's intentional or not. Lastly, I would say the question you asked about what are the priorities, and as the senator laid them out, they are all priorities for us in this community. And that's why we need all hands on deck. While I can address some of the health issues, while you can address some of the economic problems, and others can take on education, by working together and having coordination of efforts, we have to be able to do more than one thing at one time, because the problems are too great. We have to continue to, address the violence and the other issues. So that's why I'm grateful to you, Barbara, for doing this show, and hopefully it's going to encourage more people to join us. And together we can do so much more. And I'm happy to be a part of this effort.
So, the other thing too, it's working, coordinating together. But going back to something that the senator said, it's about getting the work done. We go to so many meetings where people sit down and talk for hours, and we walk out, and what's the takeaway? What did we get done? And so that's what the work at the 125th Street interagency collaboration is about. Each agency have to tell us what have they done since the last meeting to make 125th Street better. And if you haven't done anything, why not? What obstacles did you run into? What challenges? What help do you need? Who do you need to talk to help move the needle forward? COVID made it clear to us we don't have leeway anymore. Every second counts. Every day we need to accomplish something. We need to keep moving forward. We can't be waiting on some grants. There was a time when I first came to Harlem, you couldn't get a grant, but we kept moving forward. People jumped in and took lead of certain issues and stuff. And then a little bit more compassion. When something happens, call somebody to see if they're okay. It's like when they had the shooting down there, the last one we had, it never crossed my mind until I got an email from someone who knew the wife asking me to come to the funeral. That hasn't happened. I have not received an email or inquest like that since I first started in Harlem. So we have to bring back the compassion. We have to understand that these are not numbers, like Cardell said. It's really our people that we're losing around these struggles. I'm going to close with that part because there are two events coming up. One Virginia is having on health, and I think the Senator, you have something coming up. I heard about it in the Ruckus with seniors or something. Maybe I got it a little wrong, but I know you have an event coming up. So let's let our listeners know what they can help. If you want to jump in, here are two events right now. Virginia, you want to go first?
That's what Senator said, jump in.
Jump in.
Ours of this week. This is Mental Health Month, as we all know. And so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, my organization, Black Health, we will be hosting a 3-day film festival at Magic Johnson Theater, and it is free. And we hope that you will come out. It is to highlight the problems of mental health, not only here in our community, but among us on a national level, and to start thinking about ways that we can do for ourselves to address these problems, as well as working with our elected officials on advocacy. So that's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And we invite you to go on our website, www.nblca.org for more information.
Cardell?
Yes, you know what? Just call my office. We are always doing something. We literally just did, I think, the event you were talking about. We had a great big senior celebration at Abraham Lincoln houses, and we did it in the park right there on 135th and 5th Avenue. And it was fabulous with Central Harlem Senior Center, as well as the Lincoln Houses Senior Center and Greater Central Baptist Church. So many people, community partners were involved with that. Wilma Brown Phillips and others who were all a part of that. And we appreciate them. Russell Schuler, just loving up on our seniors and giving them a good time. Vi Higginson and the Wednesday night Harlem Choir was there. So it was beautiful and it was a great gathering, but we are always doing something. My office phone number is 212-222-7315, 212-222-7315. Please call us. We have a number of things. I'm so appreciative of Virginia talking about mental health. We're doing a couple of events around mental health, how we, I forget the name. The theme was ways of healing, because there's many ways that we need to heal. Lots of people who are out here lonely, damaged, and traumatized and really need help. So we're here. I will get flyers to you for the upcoming, but we just did a whole slew of events, and we're going to be doing quite a few more coming up for the rest of May and throughout the summer. But I thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for your work, both of you.
Thank you for listening to 125th Street and Beyond. I'm Barbara Askins. Board operator is Angela Harding. My guests today were C. Virginia Fields and State Senator Cardell Clare. Tune in next Monday at 4 p.m. for 125th Street and Beyond. Goodbye.
Bye.